Thank you, Professor Rani Mehta, for your generous introduction, and Professor Anjushri for very kind compliments that you have showered on me. I am particularly grateful to Professor Rani Mehta, Chairperson, Department of Sociology, Panjab University, for inviting me to deliver this talk. Coming to the department, online or offline, is always a great delight for me, because the department is like my second home as far as I'm concerned, and therefore I'm particularly grateful to Professor Rani Mehta for providing this opportunity. The theme of this lecture is social structure and political economy of corruption. The major thesis that I wish to advance in this lecture is that structural perspective is extremely relevant for understanding the state, the causes, the consequences, and the remedies of corruption in India. It is with this end in view that I chose the theme titled Social Structure and Political Economy of Corruption. Let me begin by making two prefatory remarks before getting down to the proper theme. Number one, that relating to concept of corruption, and the second has to do with the theories of corruption. The concept of corruption has expanded over the years. It has not been a static factor, and it's important for us that this expansion has taken place along four lines. First of all, the sphere of corruption has expanded. Earlier, corruption used to be defined as a sort of misuse of public office for private gain. Public office implying that it's confined to the government circle. Now, it has been realized that corruption takes place not only in the government circle, but in various, in fact, in all other spheres of society, including the private sector and the voluntary sector. In light of that, the definition of corruption has expanded. Now it is being viewed as misuse of not just the public office, but entrusted trust to the official. That is one expansion. Another point of expansion is in respect of the types of behavior which are included in corruption. Earlier, it was confined to bribery. Now, it is extended to various other forms. Earlier, it was in fact, it has expanded from what may be called black corruption to white corruption. Black corruption implying exchange of bribery, and white corruption referring to the covert dimensions of corruption, the invisible corruption, the pseudo corruption, if you like. For example, the election freebies or the kind of soaps for votes indicates the kind of corruption which is not recognized as corruption by the political elites, nor it is so recognized by the public. But it is nevertheless an important form of corruption, because it refers to quid pro quo, which is the essence of corruption. The third expansion is along the lines of the parties involved in corrupt affair. And earlier, the definition was from the viewpoint or from the standpoint of the corruptee or the bribee or the person who takes bribe. Now it has been expanded to also cover the person who gives bribe. So from taker to the giver. That is another expansion. The person who gives bribe is as much at fault in the eyes of law today as the person who accepts bribe or solicits bribe. The fourth important point, which I, in my earlier publication titled Towards a Sociological Theory of Corruption Advanced, was that there are two ways of looking at corruption. One from the perspective of the political elites, and the other from the perspective of the people. Now, from the point of view of political elites, corruption is what is regarded as corruption by the law of the land. But from the people's perspective, it is corruption is what is regarded as corruption by the people at large. Now, take for example the political horse trading, or for that matter, the kind of dubious games that are played by politicians in terms of vote bank politics or casteization of elections. They are all indicative of people know that it is a pseudo form of corruption. So now it's important that this distinction between the private and the public is taken cognizance of. Now, in the light of these four trends, I have defined corruption for purposes of this address as follows. Corruption is betrayal of institutional trust. Corruption is betrayal of institutional trust by a functionary or a man of general public, or by both for private gain or mutual gain. Now, the official or the taker of the bribe takes it for his own self-aggrandizement, while the giver in fact gives it in order to influence the rule-based decision making or policy formulation of the government, and it takes two to really play corrupt. Though there are a few forms of corruption in which only one party can play corrupt, but by and large it takes two to play corrupt. Now, what it shows is how the social structure or the structure as such plays an important part in defining corruption. The political elites are part of a structure on the one hand, and the masses are the other part of social structure. And if you cannot really have an adequate definition of corruption without taking into account the people's perspective on it. It cannot be limited only to the political elite's perspective or the legal view of corruption. It is here that sociological approach comes to fore in understanding the concept of corruption. Now, this is with regard to the concept. Coming to the causes of corruption, come to the theories of corruption, which are nothing but causal explanations of corruption. We have about four theories obtaining at the moment in the literature, and nobody has really cared to discern these theories, but I would like to share them here with you so that I can build upon them my own thesis of the structural perspective on corruption. The one theory that comes from the field of economics, particularly institutional economists, they explain corruption in terms of cost-benefit analysis. In simple words, what they maintain is that it is a case of low cost and high benefit instance, and therefore it is this calculus on the part of the people who are involved, the parties who are involved in playing corrupt, whether the corruption will be more of a beneficial act for them or a losing act. It is this which defines it, and therefore Corruption is there because corruption is a low cost, high profit activity. That is their explanation. As a matter of fact, this explanation derives from what in economics is known as the principal agent theory. Principal agent be having different or multiple layers. Public is the principal in respect of the politicians who are the agents of public to carry out the public verdict, and bureaucrats are agents of the polity or the legislators who are the people whose verdict is carried out by the bureaucracy. And therefore, in view of this, it's important for us to understand that the agent, whenever the agent finds it a cost effective activity, it doesn't mind playing corrupt. So this is one explanation that prevails. The second perspective is with respect to deficient bureaucracy. It is argued that the causes of corruption lie in the bureaucratic rules and procedures. The rules are complex and the procedures are cumbersome, and these complex rules and cumbersome procedures are used by the officials, the functionaries, to really extract bribe from the people. There is a culture of red tapeism which is considered to be one of the important contributors to corruption. So this is second. And the third perspective is in terms of the election funding or electoral funding. It's important that the electoral funding provides opportunities for the politicians to really come into connivance with the corporate world, and the fact that our election system is so expensive, it makes easier for the two to join hands to loot the people. Therefore, this election funding or electoral funding is the third perspective. And the fourth is popularly known as social support perspective. The social support perspective is the one which maintains that the Indian social system provides support for corruption in some ways, and there lies the roots of corruption. So these are the four perspectives. To these perspectives, I would like to add one more at the popular level, because these are the popular theories of corruption, if you like. The first one that I would like to say that one can easily speak of opportunity structure theory. Opportunity structure theory implies that the system provides inbuilt opportunities for the people to play corrupt, and it depends upon the availability of opportunity structure for a person to play corrupt. A person may not have integrity, he may like to play corrupt, but if there are no opportunities to play corrupt, he will not be able to play corrupt. So it's all a function of opportunity structure. An Urdu couplet will illustrate it in a meaningful way. बिकने तो हम भी आए थे बाजार में, मगर क्या करें कोई खरीदार ही न मिला. That explains that even if some teachers or some men of integrity, they wish to play corrupt, there are no opportunities for them to play corrupt. So corruption is a function of opportunity structure. These are the five popular explanations that we have. As I said earlier, I would like to advance a structural perspective, and this structural perspective, in my view, has two strands. One, socio-cultural structure, the other, political economy structure, and that is the reason why I chose the theme, the social structure and political economy of corruption. I would like to illustrate this structural perspective in terms of these two strands causal explanation about corruption. Now, to begin with the first, that is the socio-cultural structure, it is argued that society in India, as also in many other parts of the world, including Asia as a whole, even African continent, society is family-based society or familistic society. Now, the family provides pressures, or family really generates pressures on the people who are in positions of power and influence to get or as far as possible have access to benefits to the family members or the members of kin group. What it leads to is the nepotism or nepotist corruption. As a matter of fact, nepotist corruption is a specific feature of corruption in many Asian and African countries, and therefore it is important for us to know that this is one. Now, the nepotism may have this strict definition, but there is also possible to provide a broader definition of nepotism, which would include showering favors on the people not only of one's own family or kin group, but also of the members of one's party, the party loyalists, or one's friends, and so on. Now, in all these cases, what you have is a central feature of nepotism, or central feature of this kind of corruption, and it is that here the favor is showered on a person on the basis of or by reason of ascriptive status. The person has inherited that kind of a status, either of being a family member or of being a member of kin group, and it can be extended to also the neighbors, because neighbors are also regarded as chachas and taus and so on. So in a wider frame, it can be extended to the political patronage distribution also, where the politicians try to, in a way, oblige their own party loyalists, and whatever discretionary power the politicians have, they would like to give that advantage of discretionary power to their party loyalists. So there is a narrow definition, a strict definition of nepotism, and there is a broad definition. The broad definition has it that corruption is bestowal of favor by a person, by an official or a functionary on not only one's family members, but also one's caste fellows, one's religious fellows, one's party loyalists, and so on. This is nothing but a broader view of, and this kind of corruption, you know, the family-based corruption and Sephardish-based corruption is so popular in nations of Asia and Africa. So this is how the social structure is believed to provide for corruption. There is another dimension of it, and it is that there is also a cultural dimension to it, and the cultural dimension is that the family culture makes it obligatory on members of family to take care of the interests of other members. So it becomes almost a cultural obligation on a person in power to really play corrupt if he wants to have domestic peace in the family, and thus there is a cultural dimension to it. Important thing here is that, as a matter of fact, some foreign scholars have gone to the extent to argue that it is inherent in Indian social system, in Indian socio-cultural system, that even gods are bribed, even deities are bribed, and therefore there is something in the very cultural tradition of India and some other countries in Asia and Africa where culture plays as important a role as social structure. Now, personally, I am I don't hold this view, As a matter of fact, those scholars who have argued this way, they really don't understand Indian society and culture. The reason why I say so is because what you have in Indian society is not an acceptance or a support for it. As a matter of fact, most of the other people other than the family members, or people other than one's party members, or people other than one's friendship circle, they are always highly critical of this kind of practice, and they look down upon that officer who plays corrupt. So, as Gunnar Myrdal in his work Asian Drama has rightly pointed out, that it will be wrong to presume that society approves of this practice. As a matter of fact, that is the reason why Myrdal calls it asocial behavior. Corruption is viewed by him in Indian context as asocial, that is, that which is not really approved of by society, though some families or the people who are involved in it may play corrupt in nepotist ways. So this is about the socio-cultural support system. You can very well see how social structure plays a part in causing certain kinds of corruption, including nepotist corruption, patronage distribution, Sifarish-based corruption, and so on. These are the specificities of corruption also in Asia and Africa. Now, moving on to the political economy structure. Earlier we dealt with the socio-cultural structure. Now the other perspective is political economy perspective. Now, political economy focuses on the interface between polity and economy. In order to understand the political economy perspective in a systematic manner, let us understand that the discipline of political economy started, or it may be traced back to the classical theory times. It was classical theorists like Adam Smith or Marx or Weber or Ricardo who really wrote and discussed the role of political economy for understanding social issues of their times. Now, that is called classical political economy. And in the classical political economy, there were two discourses. One is called the discourse which is normative. Normative discourse is the one which prescribes what is the ideal kind of role that a state can play in generating and promoting wealth. That is normative. That is a state's role in promoting economic growth. But the operational or the scientific discourse focuses on the operative relationship between polity and economy at a given point of time in a certain society. Now, so that is why it is called scientific discourse. Now, when we are referring to political economy today in relation to corruption, we are not concerned with the normative, we are concerned primarily with the operative interface between polity and economy. Now, this classical economy, from the classical period, the classical political economy has grown to some greater proportions, and it is now called new political economy. The defining features or distinguishing features of this new political economy are two. Number one, in the earlier political economy, polity and economy were treated as two separate or discrete entities, and relationship was seen in terms of the two coming together in some ways. But in the new political economy, this distinction between state and market or polity and economy is not accepted. They say they always act in an integrated manner. They don't act as parallel forces. they act in tandem with each other. And so this is one defining feature of the new political economy, that is the integration of integration of the market structure and the state structure. Or as Anthony Giddens, sociologist, is known to have said, what you have is structuration. The structuration, according to Giddens, is all about integration of polity and economy. It is not about the separation of the two as in the classical political economy. So this is the most important defining feature of the new political economy, which looks at the relationship between polity and economy as one of integrated nature. A second feature of new political economy is that it looks at the issue in a historical manner, and thus these are the two defining features. Let us now examine the state of corruption in India in terms of this new political economy perspective. Now, the corruption in India, when I'm talking about it, I'm talking about corruption in post-independent era. And of course, that is not to say that there was no corruption earlier. We have a lot of literature on corruption even during the pre-independence period. But for the sake of understanding the contemporary situation, I would like to focus on the post-independence era. What we have is that corruption has evolved into three phases in independent India. The first phase may be called turning point, or a sort of downing phase of corruption, and the second may be called state of flash point of corruption, explosion of corruption, and the third is that of decline. The first phase ranges from independence onward till 1990. That is the first phase of corruption. It is a phase of downing of the corruption in independent India. What we have in this phase is the kind of political economy that got characterized as regulatory economy, or the socialist economy, or the one which aimed at building up a socialistic pattern of society. So, as far as the role of state economic policy during this phase is concerned, the state's economic policy was that of regulating Indian economy, and that generated what is now very well known as license quota permit Raj. And it is this license quota permit Raj which provided for the proliferation of corruption in India, and the kind of corruption that developed at that time was a sort of more of coercive corruption, because it was a consequence of regulation of economy, and of course it also had witnessed some sort of collusive corruption. So this was the first phase, license quota permit Raj, when the economy was regulated, the market was regulated by the state. In the second phase, coming to the second phase, which begins in 1991, what we have is a paradigm shift in the state's economic policy. And this paradigm shift is from building a socialist society in India, socialist pattern of society in India, to a sort of capitalist economy. And we are aware of the fact that the economic reforms were introduced in 1991, and this period ranges from 91 to 2013 or 14. During this period, because of this paradigmatic shift in the state's policy, economic policy, from regulation to LPG, that is liberalization, privatization and globalization. It represented a transition from a socialistic economy to a sort of capitalist economy, and since it emphasized the role of private sector, and therefore it led to sort of co-optation of private sector in the economic field along with the state. So what we have is a kind of collusion between state and the market during this period. Since globalization insisted on large scale urbanization in India, because that is what would promote markets in India, which is what globalization sought for, and therefore it provided huge opportunities in terms of construction activity, construction of not only roads, flyovers, but also multiplexes and very many other corporate houses. So what we have is a situation in which there were huge opportunities for the private sector to join hands with the public sector, with the government, with the polity, and during this period, therefore, it led to some kind of an exponential rise in corruption. Hardly a day used to pass when there will not be a news about a scam or an economic scandal in the newspapers or in the media. So this was a phase when corruption reached its zenith. It reached its climax in India. Now, from 2014 onward, of course, there was no change in the state's policy, economic policy, yet the role of state changed in relation to the economic context, and state became a little tough or a little firm in its resolve to contain corruption, and this led to marginal decline in corruption. What is evident from, important point to note is that this decline is only marginal. The reports of Transparency International as well as Center for Media Studies and other agencies indicate that there is that it has made a little difference, but the difference is too little to be of much significance. And the difference is by way of decline in the grand corruption rather than in the petty corruption. So that is where we are. Now what it shows is how there is a linkage between the dynamics of the state's economic policy and the dynamics of corruption. This really offers a hypothesis which needs to be examined in respect of the linkage between the dynamics of state's economic policy and the dynamics and growth and the types of corruption that flourish as a result of that. So this is about the first principle as well as of the political economy, which is looking at the linkage between political economy and corruption in a historical context, because the new political economy projects the issue in terms of or in the framework of historical development. That is what we have seen. Now moving to the second critical facet of political economy, and that has to do with electoral bonds, that has to do with electoral funding, so to say. Now the point is that in India we have democracy, and a democracy which is more of a representative democracy, than a substantive democracy. That's a point to which we'll come a little later again. At the moment, this would suffice to say that during this phase, what we find is that the state try to explore the corporates to get funds for elections in a manner that was a dubious manner. So what we have is our election system is expensive, remarkably expensive system. This can be judged from a simple fact. There are works which indicate how expensive is the electoral system in India. For example, in a recent work by Vaishnav and Kapoor, and the work is called Cost of Democracy, that is the title of the book, and what it shows is that they estimate the estimate of expenditure in campaigning, election campaigning for India, as far as this coming election is concerned. They estimate it at $10 billion, American dollar 10 billion. And considering the fact that we have 543 MPs, that's what Lok Sabha comprises, it comes to 129 crore per constituency. Now, given this staggering figure of 12900 crore, one can very well imagine as to what kind of electoral funding do we require. Now, obviously, what has happened is that, of course, earlier there have always been donations by the corporate houses to the political parties, but now in the new regime, a new scheme of corporate of electoral funding has been introduced, which is called electoral bonds. Electoral bond scheme provides for making donations to political parties through buying these bonds from the State Bank of India. A notable point about these electoral bonds is that it is unlimited amount that one can buy the bond for, and this will remain, the identity of the donor will remain secret. It's only the State Bank of India, which is owned by the Government of India, that will have a certain number, which of course eventually may be accessed by the ruling outfit, whether present or later, any other political outfit. So now the point to note is that this electoral bond scheme constitutes yet another critical and crucial area which provides opportunities and scope for corruption, because all the black money that one has or that people have can be easily channeled through these electoral bonds to political parties, and obviously one thing that we have to understand is that the donors or the industrialists, particularly the corporate houses, do not donate, they only invest. So obviously this eventually exerts an influence on the state policy, because this is the way in which corporate houses may have an influence in an indirect manner over the government that may in a way pay for the government opting for certain kind of policies that may not be in the interest of the nation but may be in the interest of certain corporate houses. So this is another important area, the election funding, which is responsible for promoting corruption in India in a huge manner. Now the third equally important facet of political economy is the character and quality of both the state and the economy. The character and quality. I have chosen these words with care. The character of state in India, if one has to make some objective observations, is anything but principled. Of course, we have democracy in India, but as I said earlier, this democratic polity that we have in India is itself open to several interpretations. There is a representative democracy, which is nothing but an electoral democracy, and there is a substantive democracy. What we have in India is not substantive democracy, but electoral democracy, the representative democracy. And that has implications, because if the politics is not principled, if the state is not principled, if the polity is not principled, obviously that provides for corruption in various ways. Similarly, our polity is also known for its criminalized character. It's well known that even during the recent elections, as high as 83% of the contestants across all political parties were crore-patis. They had income of more than 1 crore. Now, the point to note here is that here is a country of poor people which is being governed by a club of rich people. More important than that, this makes the people of integrity to enter politics extremely difficult, because the men of integrity cannot amass all that wealth which is required to contest election. And so there is a kind of selectivity that is introduced in the system through this process, and therefore what we have is again a situation which is conducive to corruption. Another point to note about our democracy is that it is a flawed democracy. According to various political agency surveys, it has been found that there are democracies and democracies. There is a variety of democracies. There are flawed democracies and there are healthy democracies. Indian democracy has been rated as a flawed democracy. And given how do we understand this flawed democracy? This flawed democracy indeed is well explained in Gunnar Myrdal's work in Asian drama, in which he clearly states that Indian state is a soft state. A soft state is the one which does not abide by principles, which acts in unprincipled manner. So this is the nature of polity. With respect to this nature of polity, there is one more thing that we have to understand, and it is that the state structure is a powerful structure. Indeed, I would say that state is power concentrate for all practical purposes. Just as the economy is capital concentrate, state is a power concentrate. What does that mean? You know, the state has control over valuable resources of the country, huge, abundant and immense resources. To take, for example, just a few for purpose of illustration, it has control over natural resources. The state has complete control over natural resources like land, forest, rivers, or the other natural resources that the country has. Similarly, the state has complete control over energy resources, whether it is coal or oil or other energy resources. The state has complete control over them. In the same way, state has complete control over infrastructural resources, whether it is railways or road or seaport or airport. Complete state control over these infrastructural resources. Similarly, state has complete control over coercive resources, whether it is police or it is taxation or it may be enforcement directorate or CBI. The coercive resources are in complete control of the state. So from this one can easily make out, and what is even more, state has complete control over developmental resources. The development programs launched by the state, whether it is housing for the slum dwellers or the poor, housing for the poor, if you like, or the PWD, the food distribution, food procurement and distribution, and so on. All the development schemes are under the control of the state. Now, from that one can make out, one can gather easily how resourceful and powerful is the state structure. Now, given this given this power and resourcefulness of the state structure, one can easily imagine as to how much patronage capability the state has, patronage distributing capability with it, whether it is mines allocation or it is forest, transformation of forest into city situation. Everywhere it is the state which is in complete control. And if the discretionary powers are there with the state, which is as much a feature of the soft state. In the soft state, the discretionary powers are there with the state agents, which may be misused and which are often misused. Not only the politicians and the lawmakers have discretionary powers, but they also have immunity from their shielded. They are protected. The various laws that have been enacted are such that they even more recently the government enacted a law by which without seeking the prior sanction of the government, no agency can even prosecute and forget prosecution. No university can investigate, no investigating agency can investigate a corruption case. So, considering all this nature of soft state and the huge resources, the abundant resources at the disposal of the state, what we have is great opportunities of collaboration or better still collusion between the polity and the economy, and this is reflected in terms of the alliances of political parties with the corporate houses. This also reflects in terms of the nexus between politicians, administrators and businessmen. There are unholy alliances between the two, that is the polity and economy, and that really shows how the proliferation and the escalation of corruption, the explosion of corruption is there in Indian society. Thus, it should be clear from this analysis as to how political economy impinges on corruption. The three critical features, namely the state's economic policy, the electoral funding, and the character of state structure as well as of economy, clearly impact the nature and kind of corruption that we have. If in the first phase it was more of coercive corruption that prevailed, in the second phase it is more of collusive corruption that takes hold of the society, and overall what we find is that the state of corruption in India can very well be understood in terms of these features of political economy. Now, what we have seen so far is how it is the socio-cultural structure and how it is the political economy structure, how these two structures provide an explanation, provide a kind of perspective for us to understand the rise and growth of corruption in India. Now, given the fact that corruption is a structural phenomenon, it's time for us to move to the remedial measures. What do we do about containing corruption? Given this kind of analysis, where do we begin? Now, to me it seems that there are 5 remedial measures that can be considered. The first, of course, is that institutional reforms. Since corruption is a structural issue, it can be resolved only by a structural solution, and therefore, since it's an institutional it has an institutional character in India, it calls for institutional reforms. By institutional reforms, what I mean is our political reforms, administrative reforms, corporate reforms, and reforms in various institutions. So that is one, because it is only by rationalizing these institutions and sealing the sources of corruption built in them that we can control corruption. The second important remedy is that of empowering the regulatory institutions, or the anti-corruption institutions, better still. Empowering the anti-corruption institutions, institutions like CVC, that is the kind of Vigilance Commission, Chief Vigilance Commissioner's Office, or the Lokpal Office, or the independent, or making these investigative agencies independent, be it CBI or other agencies. They should be made independent rather than allowing them to stay dependent on the state or working under the control of the state. So there is a need to, now at the moment the CVC is spineless, and the same holds for other agencies. What we need is to empower them, to strengthen them, to invest them with some powers so as to discipline the corrupt officials and politicians. Now, the third and equally important is there is a need for us to promote civil society. What is important? The corruption, all the studies reveal that wherever the civil society organizations are vibrant, corruption is contained significantly. It's time that the civil society organizations come forward. They raise this issue, the manner in which Anna Hazare raised it earlier than Anna Hazare, Jayaprakash Narayan raised it. It's time that some other Anna Hazare or Anna Hazare himself comes to the platform and raises the voice and leads a mass movement in that direction. The civil society organizations should make their own contributions. The other important thing is the introduction of e-governance or use of information technology in governance. I think this can go a long way, the use of information technology and e-governance, can go a long way in containing corruption that we have in India. The fifth, to me it seems that's extremely important, one size doesn't fit all, one strategy won't do. What we need is a target specific scheme of containing corruption, a kind of form specific strategy of containing corruption, which means that different types of corruptions call for different kinds of strategies. One size doesn't fit all, as I said earlier. The strategy by which you can contain collusive corruption, you cannot contain coercive corruption, extortionist corruption. You require a different strategy to contain extortionist corruption. The strategy by which you can contain collusive corruption, you cannot contain nepotist corruption. It calls for a different kind of a strategy. So there is a need for a multi-pronged and a multi-method strategy for containing corruption. Above all, what is needed is a genuine concern on the part of the polity, what in simple words may be called political will to contain corruption. Because in the absence of that political will, no matter what you do, other measures are not going to make much of a difference to the situation. We have seen all this while that every regime takes pride in saying that it will contain corruption to the minimum, and we have seen that corruption has survived, not only survived but thrived all along, in spite of all those pretense of different political outfits. So what we need in the ultimate is a strong political will, a genuine political will, better still, to contain corruption. This is how I would maintain that the structural perspective is more enlightening for us to understand the nature and types of corruption in India, the roots and causes of corruption in India, and the remedies and strategies of containing corruption in India. I think that is time to close us and open for discussion from the floor. Thank you.